Hi, today I want to talk with you about documenting your sources. At the graduate level, it is vital that you indicate clearly to your reader whether you're doing a discussion board thread or a formal academic research paper, precisely what in your writing is yours, that is your own original ideas and words, and what you've derived from a source, whether that source was quoted directly in their own words with quotation marks, or just merely paraphrased. Now, this is no minor matter. If you fail to document your sources adequately and properly, you could be charged with academic dishonesty, more specifically, plagiarism. Plagiarism can lead to a penalty ranging from a point deduction on an assignment to an F in the course. And so it's important to get this right. So let's talk about the documentation of sources. First of all, let's raise the question, why document sources? Well, it's dishonest not to. You are claiming as your own the work of another person, and that's dishonest. Secondly, academic writing requires it. You are required to document sources at this level of work. And then thirdly, the penalties for plagiarism are severe. You simply don't want to take the risk of having a professor charge you with plagiarism. There are two kinds of plagiarism. The first is called intentional plagiarism. That's using another's words or ideas without citing the source. That is, if you use another's words, direct words, or even if you just plagiarize, even if you just paraphrase your source and don't use the exact words, but you use someone else's ideas and you don't cite it with a footnote indicating that these are not your words and your ideas, you've committed intentional plagiarism. The penalties for intentional plagiarism can even go as far as giving you an automatic F in a course. So you don't want to be guilty of intentional plagiarism. But even if you haven't committed intentional plagiarism, there is such a thing called inadvertent plagiarism. That's just sloppy documentation. Let me give you an example. Suppose, for example, that you use the exact words of your source and you use a footnote telling your reader that you used a source for these words, but you don't use quotation marks to indicate you have used the author's exact words. That's plagiarism. Now, it's not as severe as intentional plagiarism because you didn't try to hide that. You used a footnote. But still, if you use somebody's very words, you must put them in quotation marks even if you use a footnote. If you don't, you can be charged with plagiarism. Now, when do we document sources? You must document anything that is not your own original idea, even if you just paraphrase the source. Some students think as long as I don't quote someone directly, I don't have to document it. That is not so. If the ideas you are using are not yours, even if you don't use the exact words, you must put a footnote to indicate they are not your ideas. And then secondly, you must document anything that is not common knowledge. If everybody knows it, then you don't have to document it. But if everybody doesn't know it, that is, if it's not common knowledge, you must document it. Now, in terms of documentation of direct quotes, place the quoted words in quotation marks. If you quote someone directly, you must put them in quotation marks. And then secondly, introduce the quoted material by referencing the author. For example, you would say, D.A. Carson says, comma, quote. Don't just start the sentence with a quote. We don't know who is saying that. What if you were reading it out loud to someone instead of their reading it to themselves? They wouldn't know whether these were your words or Carson's words. So always introduce quoted material. D.A. Carson says, comma, quote. Now we know these are Carson's words, not yours. And then cite the source with a footnote. Even if you use quotation marks, you still must use a footnote to indicate where you got the source and what the source is. What about paraphrasing? Some students think as long as I don't quote someone directly, I don't have to document my source. Not so. Even if you paraphrase, you must document the source. Cite the source of the information with a footnote, even if it is not quoted directly. You do this to acknowledge that the ideas you were using were not yours, but your sources. that you're not the author of the ideas that you used. Now let's say a word about how to document sources. Well, in Turabian, there are two ways to document sources. The first is called parenthetical citations and a works cited list. And then the second way is through footnotes and bibliography. Turabian allows both of these, either one of these, but you must choose one. You can't mix them. And so you must either do parenthetical citations and a works cited list, or you must use footnotes and a bibliography. On your discussion boards in your class, you may do either one. You can choose parenthetical citations or you can do footnotes. But again, you cannot mix them. You must do one or the other. But, and this is important and I put it in red, your final research paper must use footnotes. You cannot use parenthetical citations in your final paper. You must use footnotes. If you look at Turabian, Part 2, the whole second part of Turabian, has to do with source citation, and she will give you all of the detail about both of these kinds of documentation methods. Finally, let me say a quick word about Turabian. Some students say, why do I have to use Turabian? That wasn't what I used in college, or whatever. Well, in seminary, Turabian is the standard. In religious studies, Turabian is the standard. Whether you go to Liberty University or any other university, you are going to use Turabian. So this is not something that Liberty is making you do and no one else does. Turabian is the style standard for religious studies. You may as well learn it because you're going to be doing this all the way through your seminary career. If you don't own a copy of Turabian, a manual for writers of research papers, theses, and dissertations, buy one. The latest edition is the 7th edition. Get one. It is an assumed text in every course in the seminary. So you may as well get a copy and learn it. Now, let's talk about parenthetical citations. Include a list of works cited at the bottom of your discussion board in full bibliographic format. Now, this is not just a bibliography. These are works you actually cited. Don't put works down there you didn't use. Then in the text, put the last name of the author and page number in parentheses after the sentence, but before the period where the source was used. Let me give you an example. The works cited reference at the bottom of your discussion board should look like this. Notice last name first because it's a bibliographic entry, and then the second line is indented. D.A. Carson and Douglas Moo, An Introduction to the New Testament, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Zondervan Publishing, 2005. Notice a couple of things. First of all, the second line is indented. Last name comes first. The second name, first name comes first. Notice that the title is in italics. There is no comma between the title and the parenthesis. And then you put the city of publication, the publishing company, and the year. It is followed by a period. By the way, you put last name first in a works cited or bibliography page because they have to be alphabetized. That's the reason for doing that. And then in the text, your citation would look like this. Note the sentence. D.A. Carson states that the prologue to the Gospel of Luke makes it clear that the author was not an eyewitness to the ministry of Jesus. And then I put in parenthesis, Carson, page 204, close parenthesis, period. That refers me back to the bottom of the page and this work, so that now I know what Carson refers to. It is page 204 in this work. That's what parenthetical citation looks like. This is what you can do on your discussion board, but you cannot do this on your final paper. And then let's look at footnote citation. Use a superscript number in the text at the end of the sentence and after the period to identify where your source was used. At the bottom of the page, the superscript number you used in the text identifies the source associated with that place. And then this is the footnote form. Notice the first line is indented, unlike a bibliography where the second line is indented. First line is indented. In footnotes, the first name comes first, not the last name. The reason is you're not going to alphabetize this. The number tells you where it is keyed in the text. The title in italics, publication information in parentheses, page number after parentheses. And then let me give you some examples. I'll give you 3 examples of the most commonly cited footnotes. The first is a book. Notice superscript number, that would be keyed to a number up here in the text, number 1. The first line is indented, and then notice, first name first. It's not Carson D.A., it is D.A. Carson. The reason is we're not going to alphabetize this. The number tells us where it's keyed in the text. So do not put last name first in footnotes. D.A. Carson and Douglas Moo, comma, Introduction to the New Testament, notice italicized, no comma between the title and the parenthesis, Grand Rapids, Michigan, place of publication, colon, Zondervan Publishing Company, the publishing company, comma, the year was 2005, close parenthesis, comma, and then page 37. That tells me that the number 1 up here in the text refers to page 37 in this work. That's how you cite a book. This is how you cite a journal article. Again, first line is indented, superscript number keys to a number in the text. D.A. Carson, first name first. I want to hit that hard because students always put last name first in footnotes, and you will lose points for that. It is first name first, comma, and then the title of the journal article, the chronology of the life of Paul. Title of the article goes in quotation marks, comma, and then the title of the journal, which is like a title of a book, it's italicized. Journal for the Study of New Testament, comma, volume 26, that's the volume, number 4, and then in parenthesis, 2005, the year of publication, comma, and then pages 18 to 33. And so this is how you would cite a journal article. And then finally, this is how you would cite an article in a dictionary. Once again, superscript number, keys to a number up in the text. And then D.A. Carson, the title of the article is Herod the Great. It's in Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible. Notice italicized because it's a title. Volume 5, publication year 1978, comma, pages 18 to 33. And so these are the 3 most common footnote forms. A book, a journal article, and an article in a dictionary. By the way, one final comment on this, always cite the author of the article, not the editor of the dictionary. The editor of the dictionary, most of the time, wrote nothing. So don't miscredit someone with something he didn't write. Look for the author of the article you cited, not the editor of the dictionary. And so this is how you would cite something in footnote form. Well, I hope this has been helpful and that you now feel more confident that you can appropriately and adequately document your sources in academic writing. Till next time, take care. God bless.